Hi, everyone. Oh, Omar, you're right. I mean, the light is really bright. Forgot my sunglasses. Um, Hi, everyone. I first of all want to thank Cisco for letting me talk about our story, which is a story about automation at Colt. Okay, how we started, where we wanted to get to, what sort of tools did we use, and fundamentally, how do we see things evolving in the future. So bear with me. I'm going to use some terms. I'm going to use the term software-defined networking. I'm going to use the broader concept of it. Bear with me. Don't be too hard. And I'm going to use other concepts to try and knit all these pieces together as a bit of a patchwork. So I want to walk you through our journey, how the architecture evolved, a bit of how or what's the driver for building network as a service, and how we are leveraging on these building blocks, and what do we see happening next. Okay. But before I go into that, I want to show you a bit of the usual marketing slide. Okay. So this is Colt network infrastructure in a slide. You see most of our network is concentrated in Europe. We do have presence also in Asia and the States. But the density of connections and the density of metro networks that we have in Europe is very high. I mean, you can pick up whichever number you prefer the most, but I want you to pay attention specifically on our interconnections with clouds and our presence in terms of buildings. You know, we have more than 280 in cloud on-ramps, and we have more than 33,000 buildings connected worldwide. That's a big network infrastructure, which is very lively, especially in the access and the metro. Okay? And we cannot forget all the long-distance connections. So we operate 7 subsea cables, which is also part of the driver for certain things that I'm going to talk to you about with regards of automation. Okay? So let's talk about our journey. Okay, where did we start? We started with pretty much as everybody else, engineering scripting. You know, the brains that know how to make things faster and easier are the brains on the ground. Okay, and the hands are skilled to do that sort of magic. Okay, so we started looking at what were all of those pockets of automation, all of those pockets of scripting, what were those skills that we had on the ground, and how to leverage on that, how to build some structure around it. Okay, so we looked at, can we automate device upgrades? Can we build a framework for people to share, to create a community and reuse capability across the board? And then can we, whatever we produce out of that community, can we bring it back to the operations environment and then use it in anger? Okay. That brought us pretty much towards the boundary between automation of tasks and building more complex workflows. So at that time, we had to make a decision on how do we scale up the game. Yeah, how do we move out from that sort of task mission to workflow, broader automation mission. Okay. So we looked at, okay, we have the validation of all of these things we've done. We have brought in a tool for doing workflow management. We have established the rules of the game with regards of development and DevOps and so on and so forth. We have established also the rules of the game with regards of testing, which is very important. And then we started working on how do we build automations that will tackle the activation problem specifically. Yeah? Not automating processes, operational processes, but looking at more how we tackle the activation, because we were struggling a lot with our stack at that time. Okay? I normally share the concept that this is probably the difficult way to start from a technology perspective, but it's the easy way to start with automation at a bigger scale, because you have less dependencies on changing processes and skills on the ground. Okay? And then we have 2 more stages over there. So after being able to embed our automation in the orchestration, we are looking at how do we close the loop, which is something we talk a lot about, but it really needs the right environment to implement. And we want to look at how do we move even further, looking at, okay, we have built all of this automated landscape, we have all of these APIs, we have all of this capability that is driving our infrastructure. Can we use something else to drive it? Or can we use something else to assist in our operations? okay? So this is where we started. Okay, we started with bare bones automation. So remember, this is past scripting, okay? So our scripting capability was contained a bit in Rundeck platform with some sort of decoration with regards of script execution in the infrastructure and so on and so forth. But then we started looking at, okay, without a model of the infrastructure, without having to endeavor massive undertaking in testing compatibility of drivers for the network infrastructure, what can we do? And we looked at, okay, let's bring in Attention to do workflow management and implement some sort of basic orchestration in our NFV infrastructure to manage the lifecycle of the virtual network functions and to tap them into an outbound system. At that time, it was Colt on Demand, our self-service portal. Okay? But we had many challenges. We didn't have the abstracted network view. We didn't have the ability to execute or to bring in other controllers into Attention. We had a very tightly coupled northbound, so it was not very good. We managed to prove the point. We didn't go far in terms of scale and adoption. So what we did next, we started looking at, okay, if we want to scale, first things first, we need to be able to drive our network infrastructure. Remember all of those 33,000 connected buildings and 280 cloud RAMs. So if we want our services or Ethernet or packet services to be able to be automated, we need to have a way to abstract that. And we brought in NSO. Okay, so NSO will be our abstraction layer from the infrastructure. So we have our first demarcation point with the network. We don't have to build workflows that are tightly embedded with the infrastructure. We don't have to build many scripts en masse that are tightly coupled with our device types, models, generations, and so on and so forth. And then the second part of the story is still without removing the tech coupled northbound with Attention, we needed to bring some secret sauce, but we were struggling to figure out how to implement our secret sauce in NSO or Attention. We thought it was far too compromising of our freedom, right? So we started looking at, okay, can we, because we are recovering some functions like ID allocation for VLANs, EVIs, you name it, into SDN, what's becoming an SDN platform. Can we actually manage it ourselves? Can we develop it ourselves and then tap it into our automation architecture? And the answer is yes, actually, we know how to do certain things. We have a lot of skills on programming. Why don't we do it? And that's what we did. So we did two main services, one for the ID allocation, and then we had a nice conversation with our IT colleagues about why they have to stop doing ID allocation themselves in the OSS stack, and we will do it ourselves in the network. And the second one, we wanted to expose ability to check paths in the infrastructure, okay? Which is the path query service you see on the left-hand side. But you probably realize there's an empty space over there that I'm going to fill in the next slide, right? We had to build a bit of structure onto that. If we want to keep the secret sauce, we have to be a bit disciplined on how we do it, because remember, we are a service provider. We don't have loads of developers hanging around, and we don't have the intention of investing in a big pool of software engineers and developers to do that. So we looked at how do we standardize that part of the picture, okay? How do we make a space for us to build microservices in a manner that we can handle, that it doesn't blow our OPEX, and that it does allow us the freedom to build the secrets, keep building the secret sauce outside of the main components of the architecture, the abstraction in NSO or the workflow management, and then bring in other connections to the southbound, to the infrastructure, right? We still have some challenges, okay? We still have to provide a standardized way of all of these microservices to authenticate that we are on track to do. We still have to figure out how to open up the event management to a more generalized manner so that all of these microservices are part of those notifications, and then we can make richer decisions on closed-loop automation. And we still have one problem, which is coming out from the picture already, which is increasing complexity. Remember before, we had the service delivery guys at the top, configuring the box at the bottom. And we have introduced a lot of software capability in the middle, okay? But there's a reason why we were doing that. The reason is we have a lot of capability, a lot of innovation that went in our network infrastructure, mostly in collaboration with Cisco, that we were not able to realize the value of, okay? Because it was living deep in the network infrastructure, deep in the stack. It was very difficult to pitch the things that we can do with regards of calculating paths and configuring explicit paths in the network infrastructure, because we didn't have the right stack to do that, okay? So one of the main drivers that actually opened the door for us to invest and productivize this space was something that we call the smart routing, okay? So we had a specific use case looking at how do we provide a different sort of metrics for a given service in our infrastructure that customers are in high demand for. So we normally, the purple line in the slide is our normal IGP routed service, okay? But we also have the options to do explicit path calculation in the network infrastructure, as we combine the Cisco tools in the infrastructure with our automations, and we are in control of the activation of that service through our SDN stack. So is there an opportunity for us, for example, to also bring in another part of the story, which is the assurance stack, and then show something which is relevant for customers, like, for example, the energy footprint of their service or the visualization of their services before they even order them from us, right? A preview of the service, if you wish. And the answer was yes. We just needed to do a bit of work on how to unleash that power through the software architecture principles we had in what I showed you earlier. So what we did is we introduced this microservice layer as a bridge between activation stack, so the stack I was talking to you about on the right-hand side, and the assurance stack, the stack that I have just introduced concept. So our path query service is the first example of a microservice we have built, which was fairly cheap to build. It's not a massive complex piece of software that actually talks the language of SDN, so it leverages on the APIs we have on activation on the right-hand side, and is able to get data points and aggregated information about a service in the context of a service for a customer from the left-hand side. So now we can provide, to the portal, the far right on the picture, we can provide the insight of how a service is going to be routed eventually, or how a service at a city level can eventually be routed through our network infrastructure with a lot of metrics on its footprint, delay topology, but also energy and derived carbon. Right. So that was a bit eye-opening for us, because this closing the loop at this level has two main benefits. We don't need to change the OSS stack above. They just request something in a new fashion. The on-demand portal comes to SDN and requests something in a new fashion, which is the intent, an abstracted view. And then we do some calculations leveraging both applications that run in the network and the assurance stack to put together an answer that then offers more options to the customer in the front end. Okay? If you stick around tomorrow, my colleague Matthias, who's in the room, and Amish from Cisco are going to be presenting the details, and you will be able to see the front end of that application. Okay. But I wanted to introduce this just to lead to the next slide, which is numbers. Okay, I have to discuss a lot about numbers in my day-to-day work. It's becoming cumbersome. We have fully automated 3 products: Ethernet private line, Ethernet virtual private line, and IP access, or half of the flavors of IP access through our models in NSO and the automations. And yet we are dealing with more than 120 workflows. I think it's roughly 20-odd high-level automations, and then a hierarchy of workflows underneath, and more than 100 APIs overall in the system, right, that those workflows call in. So this system has been designed mostly for machine-to-machine communications. It's services and automations talking to other services and automations, microservices and automations. It's difficult for the usual operations, regular operations person, regular tech person, to understand what to do when problems arise if they don't have proper visibility on the tools or training on the tools and so on and so forth. Okay? And this in production looks like roughly 10 microservices and 30 virtual machines, so it's not a massive construct of how our infrastructure, whatever it is. But the most important part is that we had to invest a lot into building testing automation, okay? So for this implementation so far, we have more than 10,500 automated test cases. So we run all of this automatically every sprint. And Matthias, you feel free to correct me if I'm wrong with that. All of that runs in the CI/CD pipeline. So it runs after our CI/CD pipeline, right? And there's a fundamental reason for that, which is we have to grow confidence in our service delivery and operations guys that we are not just lightly and artisanally building automations here. This is proper, if you wish, sausage machine. Okay, we are determined to make automations very robust, very dependable, very trustworthy. Okay. So I already introduced you to the problem. So the sort of conversations we are having. Data and dashboard overload. We have NSO, we have iTential, we have 10 microservices, hundreds of automations, APIs. How on earth somebody is going to be presented with that and accept the challenge of resolving problems in production live with a screaming customer on the phone, eventually? Yeah. It's a big challenge, okay? It's a big challenge. Now, I must say our colleagues in operations and service delivery, and especially with the technical assistance center, they are great because they haven't said no. We made them part of this. However, we reckon this is a challenge we have to help them through. We cannot throw these automations over the fence and expect that this will be nice and rosy in the day-to-day. Second problem, APIs and microservices everywhere. That's not their day-to-day. Their day-to-day job is CLI and scripts today and some tools. It's not about talking to APIs and talking to microservices and checking microservices, right? So this is a completely shift on where their focus for RCA, for example, is. Third one is they no longer have a single point of entry. Before, it was, I know where the box is, I know where the problem is, I know where the customer is complaining. We can find out in the topology where we have to start looking at, right? And yes, it was multiple devices, but you knew you had to go to the device to get some data. Now you can enter through the NSO way and figure out what's happening with the communication with the boxes. You can go to the workflows. You can go to the service managers, the microservices I talked to you about. So there are many places. Again, it stinks of complexity, right? And the last one, but not least, is we have designed this thing to be machine-to-machine automation. Okay, we want humans to be assisted by this. Sorry, I'm talking about humans as a third being entity. We want our people to be assisted with this. We want these automations to do the job for them while they focus on resolving more pressing problems like how to customize a service or how to improve our delivery time, right? So, but then that poses the complexity under the bonnet. But I'm not talking anything crazy here. I mean, we've seen this happening in the automotive industry, in the health industry, aviation industry. Everything has grown a lot of automation layers and machine complexity that hopefully, if well designed, can be managed and controlled by us operating it, right? So what's next? We are looking at, obviously, how to keep going and how to develop more automation capability, how to leverage more on the new features that are coming in NSO, in iTential, in our own secret source development. But we have to pause for a second and look at how do we bring our whole organization with us, right? So we are looking at the new approach. First of all, we have to remove, or we have to change the traditional way of interacting with the network. Remember, I told you CLI is easy for many of our guys. Scripting is easy. Going into a jump host and start doing things in a bash is easy. Going through APIs and microservices and new tools, it's not that easy, okay? Because there's a lot of jumping from system to system if we're not careful. And that means wasted time. That means slower resolution of problems. Second one, sorry, and for this one is, the reflection is no single dashboard is perfect. If we do the sort of exercise of going and talking to everyone about how do they want to interact with SDN. We will get requirements that eventually will give us either a Frankenstein dashboard or many different dashboards for many different user communities. We can do that. That's how we do things normally, but we probably have to start rethinking that. Okay. Second one is a multiply user effectiveness. I told you, we want this automation to help them achieve more and do more, right? But being hands off the network, it can only be if you have the right tools in place. Okay, so the architectural principles behind abstracting and working with models rather than boxes, and working with models for processes rather than with scripted or hard scripted things is very important. Third one is we have to introduce deep assistive technology, and you know where I'm headed to probably. This is very relevant to the presentation you saw earlier. So we are convinced we can leverage on AI to actually break that complexity. Maybe not today, there needs a bit of time, and we have to do a lot of testing on technology, but we have already conducted some proof of concepts internally, and we are collaborating with Cisco with very interesting aspects in this front. Again, remember what I told you earlier. Our automation architecture, our SDN platform is designed for machine to machine. So we really want machines talking to machines, right? With some sort of control from ourselves. And the last one is, okay, but then how do we persuade people to trust on this? But again, it's the same story about how on earth would somebody trust a plane to drive or to fly itself? It is doable. We've demonstrated it in many other engineering areas. We can do it here. But we have to bring concepts that are related to proactivity and predictability, right? So ML has helped a lot in the assurance space, but we don't have the equivalent of ML in the activation space. And what's even worse, we're missing the bridge. That's why we are focusing on bringing these two things together, which brings me to the latest statement, which is observability and autonomy of the network has to be seamless. It has to be thought together, has to be designed together. Okay? And this is a very strong bit on our side. Our architectural principles are exactly looking at that. So what are we looking at in terms of evolution of architecture? Three things, just three bubbles. Network as service. Software-defined networking is the foundation for being able to offer cloud-like services of a network, out of a network. Okay? There is no NAS without a proper automation infrastructure which is able to abstract and model what's happening in the network. Okay. Second one is AI. Again, as I said to you earlier, that complexity, we have to break it down. Driving all of those APIs, microservices, along with the hardware box and the infrastructure, along with the assurance stack, it's a daunting problem. We can use the capability that Omar, Javier, and the team and Niels were talking about earlier about breaking the problem in smaller parts and having those assistive brains dealing with bunches of APIs here and there, and then working together to help us out through the process. And the last one is partnerships. And those of you who know me, I keep talking about this. We love talking about technology. There's no technology if you don't have the people in the right mood, if you don't have the right journey, the right partners for the journey, if you don't have the right skills, and people are not willing to embrace the brave new world. Okay? We are very lucky because we managed to have a very, very healthy relationship with our partners for this technology stack, with Cisco, with Essential, with our development partner, Doctus, here in Sweden, and with our development partners assisting us with the testing in India. So, but we are very vocal about it. We don't want the usual vendor-customer relationship here. We want to test things in advance. We are willing to take risks, but everybody needs to understand what the benefit is. And if you agree or if you don't agree, give me a shout, please. I will be more than happy to talk to you about it. Thank you very much.
All right. We do have some time for questions. So if anyone has a question, there's the Slido. Or just stand up and shout. Any questions here? I think you all look hungry, so you're probably looking forward to lunch.
I think that's probably the case.
Yeah, probably.
Me too, by the way.
Yeah, they're getting hangry. Well, take some time, think about your questions. You can catch Joan at lunch. We've got one session between us and lunch left. But thank you very much, Joan.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining the stage.
Cheers.